Hey, good morning. I appreciate you taking the time out to listen to a blowhard like me speak. The greatest thing that Scott did for me was not put anybody behind me so I can go off on my tangents, and hopefully we can get some good information out to y'all. There's numerous people to thank when you're up here. No one gets up here by themselves. First, I want to thank the NSCA, in particular, Peter Melanson, Scott Caulfield, and Boyd Eppley for reaching out and giving me the best opportunity I've had as a speaker in the United States. This is the first time I've spoken at the NSCA National Conference, so the honor is mine, and it's an extremely humbling experience. 2, my wife, who's been on this long journey with me for 23 years, the ups and downs of coaching. I live a real-world life. I'm a coach. I've traveled my family to 6 different states, been fired, rehired. That's life. That's coaching. Without her, I don't know if I'm standing up here today. To my 2 sons who didn't choose this life, they've had to fight adversity and they've won too. The people who have put me here are the people that I've been affiliated with and who've allowed me to raise my level of coaching, who have challenged what I believe in to make sure that I can justify to you why we do what we do. Because that's the key to a successful coach, especially a strength coach who gets into pity-pat fights with sport coaches over why you do what you do. If you cannot justify your programming, you're going to lose to the head coach. They're giving you your clients. Some of you have not figured that out yet. And I've been blessed with some of the best people to work with. Some of them are in here today. It would take me over an hour to thank every one of them. They know who they are. But more importantly, I thank you for coming in to listen. Hopefully what we do today is to reaffirm some things. This is not science. This lecture is not science. I'm the most practical guy in the room. What I'm going to give you is 23 years of working the floor, writing programs, making certain things that people want to make complex extremely simple. This is a give and take lecture. I'm going to give you every part of information that I can, and for any question you ask that I have the answer, I will give it to you. But my expectations is to you to take something. In this day and age, too many people want the information but don't want to learn it. That's why if you see, my slides have no written information on it. Why? Because if I don't know it, I shouldn't be talking about it. And I want you to take the information that applies to your world. And how do you do that? But writing it in your words. Because then you can bring it back and interpret it your way and make it successful. It's as simple as that. That's the art of coaching. Is make it yours and believe in it and have the passion and the heart and the ability to go out and prove the values that you believe in work regardless of the setting you're in. Oh, it works, great. If you are familiar with our programming, I call it complex simplicity, because I want to take everything that's been brokered to me and make it as simple as possible. Why? Because it's easy to interpret. We live in this world now of the terminology. I mean, there's 90 different ways to say hypertrophy now. You know what that is? Just get them big. There's 90 different ways to talk about maximal strength. Get them strong. It's not that hard. So for me, I'm always looking for ways to reiterate to the people that work for me and then to our athletes who, when they ask questions, I can give them an answer that they can understand. Not looking at me like, look at coach trying to big time me. So this is my interpretation with the help of many others. I reserve the right to be wrong. I'm not here telling you, oh, don't listen to no one else today, I have all the answers. I don't have all the answers. This is an evolution of 23 years, and it still evolves. That is why I think we've had tremendous success, whether we've trained 10-year-olds or NFL All-Pros. We continue to evolve. Our weight rooms are our labs, and fortunately for me, I've had 5 great labs with some of the best athletes in the world. So we've heard these terms before, micros, mesos, and macros. Everybody has their interpretations of them. What I'm going to do, and more importantly for the young practitioners, is to show you what 23 years of experience has given to me, and hopefully I can share this with y'all and you can take something away from it. First, microcycles. Everybody knows the typical definition. It's your Stanley weekly training plan. We classify ours by letters. And we have come up with, 5 distinct microcycles. What we call week A is an alternative microcycle. That's very simple. I've lumped everything into this one microcycle. If you have a specific way you train your athletes, whether it's 4-day-a-week, 3-day-a-week, Olympic-based, powerlifting-based, CrossFit, high intensity, 1 set to failure, that is your dynamic and that is your structure and methodology. The alternative microcycle is when you get completely away from that and you do whatever you want. It might make no rhyme or reason. It comes down to that. Or it might be in my case where I train guys 3 days a week in the weight room and we do a 4-day-a-week program. That would be what I consider an alternative microcycle. Or if I'm in the middle of a long period of time where I can link cycles together and I know my guys need a break, I may throw an alternative one after a cycle where we don't do anything. We might even get out of the weight room and do strongman stuff on the field all week. So the basic definition for us is an alternative microcycle is very simple. Anything that doesn't comply with your organized structure of your usual plan. The next 4 are termed but mean nothing as an individual microcycle until they're linked together. And that's base load, deload to reload, and performance. As standalones, the definitions really mean not much. But when you start linking them together, that's how they tie in, and that's how you develop cycles. But for us, the base is the introductory week of a cycle. We're going to introduce new exercises. We're going to base our workouts off of possibly new training maxes. Generally, the density or the tempo of that week is a little slower because there's going to be a little bit more teaching going on. Then we have week L, which is our load. Generally, the load week would be the second week of a linked progression. The programming is generally the same, but the sets, reps, and intensity is going to vary. Generally, intensity is going to raise up from the base week, and mostly reps and sets can change based off the setting and based off your set and rep cycles. Now here's where we flip-flop, and when we talk about linking together, you'll see we have what we call the deload to reload cycle. This is your ability to supercompensate. And we'll talk about the 2 variations of what I call complete cycles and how we utilize this. In the old terms, and it's very simple, work them hard for 3 weeks, give them a week to recover, work them hard for 3 weeks, give them a week to recover. That was a standalone and basic linear periodization, and I'll talk about when I learned about a performance cycle later, or when I took a USOC Olympic lifting class. But deload to reload is generally going to be a reduction in volume intensity. Most of this stuff is review. But the exercises generally stay the same. We're going to cut down the load. We're going to cut down the intensity. And then finally, what I call performance used to be called the second load. And I call that performance because that week of the cycle is what I say, that's go time. That's the highest level of intensity of our big lifts, and we're going to push the max. We are not afraid to go off the script. Because when we finish a cycle, I want to make sure we've gotten the best efforts from our guys in the weight room or on the field in our running programs. But our basis comes off these 5 microcycles. And then it's up to us to learn how to differentiate loading and parameters based off what the goals of cycles are. Within these microcycles comes your daily sessions. And this is the more specifics. How are you going to lay out your weeks? How many days a week do you think are necessary to lift? How many days do you think is necessary to run? Then running is broken down into linear speed, lateral speed, conditioning, which is broken down into COD drills, interval training. And then for us, we have another day we call explosive development, which is what we pretty much do our jumps and throws. All this factors into these microcycles. Then it's how do you order these sessions? In our setting, I always prefer to run athletes before they lift for numerous reasons. One, the conditioning aspect and the running aspect shows up more in their sport than the lifting does. 2, I believe in power endurance, maximal, submaximal strength endurance. I want my athletes to be under some state of fatigue when they enter the weight room. Because at the end of the day, any one of us who trains athletes, the ultimate goal is what I like to say, last fast and play stronger longer. The teams who can maintain a high level of conditioning late and a high level of strength and power late are generally the ones that will break over the top and beat a team if everything else is even. There are times, no matter how well you train them, if you play against a team that is trained as hard as you have and they can out-athlete you, you better hope the ball bounces your way. I'm very fortunate. I've trained a lot of good people. I worked at Arizona State for 7 years. For 7 years, we lost to USC. That was when USC was rolling national titles every year. Had some of the best players in college. Now I coach 2 of those guys that were on that team. And we were talking, and they told me flat out. They said, House, that's my nickname. It didn't matter how good you trained those guys from ASU. We had way better players. So remember that. We can only control what we control in program design. We control general physical fitness measurables. We can get a guy bigger, and I'm sure everybody in here can do that. We can get a guy stronger, we can get a guy faster, we can get a guy to jump higher. But then we have to turn them over to their sport-specific coaches, and they have to take that athleticism and hopefully create a better jump shot. Teach them how to rebound. How many guys here train basketball players? How many of you have improved their vertical jumps? But you really don't teach them how to rebound. And that's where sometimes we lose some of the translation of what we are trying to accomplish. You can improve that athlete's vertical jump 4 inches, which should give him an advantage in his previous ability to rebound. But if you don't teach him positioning, boxing out, his reaction time when the ball comes off the rim, it will never show up. Same thing when you're talking about exercises to choose from. Everybody I've ever heard says, well, we got to power clean. Some people may say, well, we got to do plyos. But let me just tell you this, when you're designing your programs and picking exercises, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I believe every exercise is tremendous, but if it is not applicable, and part of it is the way you teach it, making it applicable, then it has no value. And I go to the power clean because I've come full circle with it, and I know a tremendous amount of people talk about it. If you do not perform the power clean correctly, it's not transferring explosiveness. The jumping jack, bounce it off your thigh, straight leg deadlift off the ground, power reverse curl does not transfer into explosiveness. It transfers into an extremely strong individual that has no technique and is looking to have serious issues with your training staff. So take a step back when you're designing your daily plans and picking your exercises and give your athletes a chance to be successful. Our daily session evolves based off of our running. Everything we do goes back into the strength room. Depending on what part of the year it is, depends on how we structure our weight room for these microcycles during the daily sessions. And one of them that we have just created, we just figured out a way to even make our programs more efficient, is flip-flopping different tiers. Our program is based off a 3-day-a-week total body work, and we have tiered program. Tier 1 is the priority, Tier 2 is the major, Tier 3 is the minor. Tier 4 and 5 rotate from Tier 1 and 2. Those are what I call strength mobility exercises. That's where you'll see a lot of the single leg movements and a lot of dumbbell work for upper body, as well as relative gymnastic strength for upper body. Then we have posterior shoulder, posterior chain, and neck. Most of you who've been out there, you've heard this saying, if it's very important, you should do it every day. We do a lot of things every day. We just do a tremendous amount of variation every day. When we do not run first, like during the in-season plan, tiers 4, 5, neck, posterior chain, and posterior shoulder, which when we do come off the field, we'll go Tier 1. That has now become our pre-activity prep. We flip that up top, and that becomes our pre-activity prep. Why? Because the first 2 movements are going to help prep Tier 1 and 2, and then we always want to do some type of what people call prehab work. We're always going to do posterior shoulder, we're always going to do neck, and we're always going to do posterior chain. And I'll be honest with you, the more and more I learn about neutral spine, posture, joint centration is a new thing that I'm learning, and how the head position is important in all movement in sport, I don't know if any athlete shouldn't be doing some type of neck work. I'm not talking about blow up, get a 24-inch neck in a tennis player, but I am talking about some type of stabilization. When we keep talking about neutral spine, positive alignments and all this, but yet we always tell our athletes to look and pinch the cervical spine. Well, I do that right now. That kind of hurts. So that's something I think we should talk about with all athletes, doing some type of neck work. But that's just the gist of a daily session for us. And again, this is our 5 terms we use for our microcycles. One of them is a standalone. The other 4 have to be linked together to have some type of ability to be successful and relate to a progressed and progressive state of training. Okay, now we've linked them together. What I'm going to do is what we're usually familiar with. This is a standard 4-week mesocycle. Now we're on to our mesos. In almost any text that we've read, from Stone and Fleck when I was at the late 80s just starting as a strength coach, to Bompa, to Verkhoshansky, Most people will always base things off of the standard 4-week monthly cycle. And this was the first way I learned how to write programs, a 3-up, 1-down approach. You base load, then it was another load, reload, then we go on from there. What's the next goals? For me personally, I like the word performance. Because that for me means, and that for my athlete means, that's the week that we expect things to change. Week 1, week B, week 1 of the cycle, we're establishing ourselves. We're learning the program, getting used to new exercises. Week 2, raising it up, ramping it up a little bit, watching our tempo get better, watching the density of our work get better. Then week 3, in this particular model, hey, let's go. Because what I've learned in training is we don't have a whole lot of time, and you'll see that when we talk about annual plans. We don't have a lot of time with our athletes. Rules have given us a window that's so short, we've got to be very, very precise. The days for me particular of setting 1 week aside to do just pre-testing or post-testing are over. I don't have that ability. I've got to work every type of testing I can into my programming. And generally, that might happen every week with jumping. But with lifting, it's going to fall within 1 to 4 weeks of either the week 3 or week 4 in a performance block. And regardless of what's on the script, if a guy has ability to keep going, we're taking him off the script. And we'll talk about how we do that in some of our examples. I am not afraid to give a guy a chance to set something extremely impressive as far as his personal records or her personal records. If it's a good day, I'm taking advantage of it. And hopefully those good days fall on the days I want to go off the script. If it's a bad day, they just stay with the program. And then we would go reload to deload, drop down, give you a chance to recover, move on. Typical, complete, traditional work. What I try to do with my programming, and when I work with numerous strength coaches under my umbrella, under our umbrella, is I want all terminology to be the same. I want it all to be the same. I give you a tremendous amount of creativity and ability to pick what you want. But I want you, if you come to me and I say, hey, what are you guys doing? And you say, I'm on week 3 of a complete traditional cycle, I automatically know it's a 4-week cycle and the performance week is week 3. Just like if you tell me then we're doing a maximal strength phase, I know what my terminology is and what percentages you're at. So when you're developing your plans for your staff, make sure you're aware of that. Because what happens is when you give the ability to create and everybody's using their own terms, now you lose the uniformity when that coach can't make it and you've got to take over their teams. And you have no clue what that exercise is because you may call it something else. You have no clue where they are when you're talking to them about program. I've talked to people that say, oh, so-and-so's going on vacation. It took me 3 hours to go over 1 week's program. 3 hours, it should have took you 5 minutes. Here's the card. Here's where we're at. Here's what we got. Here's the individual differences we may have with some of our athletes coming off injury out the gate. If you're spending more than 5 to 10 minutes talking to a staff member who you may have to supplement or they may have to supplement you if you're going on vacation and going to be out, you may want to rethink terminology as part of the group. So this is the easiest and simplest. This is how we learned it. This is how I learned everything when I first started, was the standard 3 up, 1 down, 4-week mesocycle. In 2002, we brought out Mike Conroy, who I think is one of the best Olympic lifting coaches in the United States, to give us the sports performance certification. that they were offering at that time. It just started out. I think it was the first year they did it. This was the very first time I heard what was called a performance cycle. And it goes off of some of what I believed in about using that performance week to ramp someone up. And you'll see the only difference of the weeks is now after week 2, you deload to reload, and then you end the cycle on performance. Now, as a former college football player and a competitive lifter, I jumped all over this because this made sense. Why, in my basic thinking was this: why would I want to end a cycle on the recovery week? I want to end it on the big week. I want guys ending that cycle knowing they got something accomplished. And when you look at it from that super compensation, if you really brought it on the load week, do you have enough time to go right into a performance week? If you're pushing it the way we do, you don't. There's times we have to do it that way because we don't have enough weeks in a year to link it together. And then we've got to make slight adjustments to the base and load weeks because we know we're not deloading the reload before we get a chance to go off the script. To me, if you have the ability to write 4-week programs and cycles, I highly recommend, if you're not trying this, to try it out and just see what happens. I think you'll be very, very pleased with the results of your performance week. And again, terminology. You come to me and say, Coach, we're doing a complete performance mesocycle. Very simple. 4 weeks, performance weeks last, and we're going to get after it. And I'll show you why I like this even more so when we link things together, and it never really hit me until I got to see things out on a plan. I'm old school. I got 2 giant grease boards in my office, graphs and exercises written all over the place, and I just sit there and stare at it for hours, trying to figure out ways to make my athletes the best they can be. It's not about, oh, I can write the greatest program in the world, because I promise you, you can write the greatest program in the world, but it might not work. And you can write the simplest program in the world, and it blows up. Art. I'm an artist. I like being the art strength coach. Okay, now, here's a problem, and I bounce around a lot. What generally tends to happen with the young strength coach, happened to me, you fall into the trap of everything has to be based off of the complete mesocycles. You have to do everything in 4-week blocks. And maybe if we were in a country where we had school of sports and everything was sport first and everything else underneath, you may be able to get away with it. But with us, most of us live on academic calendars or in the professional rank, collective bargaining agreements. Nothing is perfect. So there's imperfect ways that we've got to learn to train. The very first time I got caught this trap was in 1994. And I had been writing programs for other sports at that time, but in 94 I got to be the head strength coach at Boise State and run the football program. And if you're a football guy, you know, okay, here's your shot. You got to go. I write this beautiful program up on paper, 3 up, 1 down. We pre-tested week 1, 3 up, 1 down. We're going to test, 10 weeks, right? I lay it all out, all the exercises, got all my cycles right, all jacked up. Well, spring break fell week 8. You think them dudes are staying week 8? No. And that's what we'll talk about later in our annual plan, uncontrollable factors of a periodization model that in our society are very, very important. That's the number one thing we find out. So there's going to be times where you're going to have to elicit a response in less than 4 weeks. When that's the case, I remove the deload to reload week. I'll have to find ways within a 3-week incomplete option to manipulate certain things in the lower tiers or in the pre and post-activation work we do to build in recovery whenever I can. So when in doubt, you got 3 weeks to train them, drop the deload to reload, and ramp them up. And you'll see again, when we link them together, how it changes. So for us, this is an incomplete meso option. Mini meso option. And this happened to us in the NFL based off the way our rules planned out our phases. Sometimes you only may have 2 weeks to get something done. I still believe if you plan properly and design successfully, you can elicit a slight response in 2 weeks, especially if guys are coming off a long break, which in my situation now it does. In that case, I consider this a mini meso. And now I've dropped the deload to reload and the performance. Now some people may say, why do you drop the performance? Because the athletes that I've trained my whole life are not weightlifters or power lifters. If they didn't have to, 90% of them wouldn't. What we also forget is their number one ability is the sport they play. If you don't train Olympic lifters or power lifters, lifting is a second-tiered activity to them. So where a power lifter may be experienced enough to go performance, 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 because they're rotating exercises, my guys, my athletes need the ability to get acclimatized to the movements. And I learned this the hard way when I was at Arizona State. I got caught up in the West Side deal. I was a power lifter. I saw the results. I tried to move into that whole max effort rotation stuff. And what I found was guys were getting too banged up. Luckily, no injuries. But guys' bodies were getting too banged up because they weren't prepared for that. They weren't mature enough as lifters. They weren't mature enough as athletes. And some of them, from a mental mindset, really didn't want to be in there anyway. So I dropped the performance. I can get good work with a base and a load, and you can too. I promise you. I saw it this year with our off-season program down in Charlotte, that we got a lot done in 2 weeks. Now I've got high-level guys that can respond real quickly. That helps. But I promise you, at any level, you can get things accomplished with proper programming. Okay, now I want to talk about linking. Now you'll see these things start to fall in place. I picked 9 weeks because of the example I gave you on myself while I was at Boise State, an odd number of weeks to train. These are examples I've used numerous occasions. I wouldn't put it up there if I didn't use them. That's not fair to you. This was what I would consider our typical programming when I was at the college level and the rules changed and they implemented discretionary time. When I first started as a college strength coach, we had, from the time finals was over to the time they reported, to train athletes. And 99% of the time, really 9 out of 10, 90%, 9 out of 10 times that I wrote a summer program under those rules, we had 12 weeks. We had 3 full 4-week cycles. Man, that made me feel really, really good about what we were doing. Well, what happened was NCAA flipped the switch on us. And now they said you are only allowed to have an organized program 9 weeks counting back from the time you report, and you must give them a mandatory 1-week discretionary time. For the most part, we were very fortunate that the way our schedule worked out, 4th of July week was always week 5. And that also generally was the little mini break between summer session 1 and summer session 2. That's easy. There's your alternative week. Because most of the guys may scatter, some guys are leaving, some guys are coming in. So for us, we developed a plan where we had 2 4-week performance mesocycles. Mesocycle 1 was based off of a little bit more long-term volume. With that I mean, in the running program would be 300-yard shuttles, gassers, building up our anaerobic capacity. In the weight room with our core lifts would be 4s, 5s, and 6s for multiple sets. Mesocycle 2, now we're preparing more closer to the season. We're running multiple position-specific plays, up to 75 to 80 plays a session, short sprints with short rest intervals, mimicking the time of play of a football player in particular. And in the weight room, we were doing multiple sets of 1s and 2s at high percentages, 80, 85, 90%, because our goal now was to raise our power endurance. Very, very successful model. We were very fortunate that our guys responded very, very well with it. Here is another model that was used. This was for when we worked with coaches who wanted us to give the guys off the very week before they had to report, which is very common. So what we did is we linked 2 4-week performance mesocycles and then dropped it off. Now I want you to study this model and you'll see why I like a performance block slightly more than a traditional block when we're ramping up our performance weeks in a couple of slides shortly. Okay, here's a little variation. 3 up, 1 down. And then a performance cycle at the end. Give them the week off, report to camp. But here's where I wanted to get at. Okay, when we look at this, and again, my interpretation, I observe the right to be wrong, but as I continued to study different graphs, something hit me about why I really like the performance cycle even better than I thought I did. When you look at this particular graph, check that out. You see I've kind of put these little slash marks on the deload to reload and the base. To me, that's like I gave them 2 deload to reload weeks in a row. And I'm not doing that because they get enough discretionary time and time off. Unless I really have to, I'm not doing that for the guys, all the women or whoever I train. And this concern, when I looked at this even made me feel better when I have a 9-week cycle and I do 3 incomplete mesocycles. Because now the base of cycle 2 really links into a deload to reload from cycle 1. So some way or somehow, when you wave up and wave down, you're going to find ability to deload to reload when you're not even thinking about it. And believe me, this isn't something that, I've been doing this for 23 years. I figured this out in the last 2.5 years, how to make sense and how to relate it to people where they can understand, hey, it's not perfect, but some of the things I worried about kind of make me feel a little better. Because at the end of the day, I ramp you up, and after that performance week, you're getting a chance to recover, especially when you change the cycles, because like I told you, we're a high-density, up-tempo programming. I can get done 66 to 70 sets of work in less than an hour with our guys. And I'm not talking about foo-foo stuff. I'm talking about a program that could have 10 sets of cleans with 4 warm-up sets, 6 sets of box squats, 3 sets of row and press, 3 sets of lunges, 3 sets of, name it. 3 sets of glute hams, 3 sets of neck, 3 sets of posterior shoulder. My guys never stop because I believe in the conditioning aspect. The 1RM is great for us to utilize as a training sense, but the 1RM is irrelevant in sport except if you're a track and field athlete and a thrower that has tremendous amount of recovery time before events. Most of the athletes we train have very few abilities to recover in a short period of time. My football players have less than 32 seconds to get back on the field and ask for an explosive component to win a play. We are going to train with a slight sense of fatigue and move the heaviest amount of weights possible so they are extremely confident in their ability to maintain the highest level of power endurance possible. And it's a tremendous way to improve lean body mass. Okay, here's a unique way of looking at a 9-week program, and this is how we structured our off-season program in Charlotte with the Panthers. This is specifically based off of the uncontrollable factors that I have in planning. Our off-season program is regulated to 9 weeks. During that 9 weeks, there's 3 distinct phases. Phase 1 is strength and conditioning only. They can only work with the strength and conditioning coach. Phase 2 is strength and conditioning, and now coaches can do individual work with their position groups. Phase 3 is OTAs, which for us is like spring ball. Our athletes can go out and do teamwork. There's certain rules within that, but they can go out and do team prep. And then within that 4-week block is mini camp. So we'll have a week of 3 OTAs, a week of 3 OTAs, a week of 4 OTAs, and then we wrapped up with mini camp. So once I'm given those parameters, and then once we meet with the coach and the athletic trainer and lay out how our football plan is going to be, then I lay out the weight program. I always wait to hear what the running plans are going to be, whether I get to design it wholeheartedly or input from the coaching staff with their field work will determine how we write the programming. So it's a very unique and complex situation, and that's why synergy and communication are also key in programming design. For us, our deload to reload week was week 4 because that was minicamp, and one of my cohorts and colleagues in the NFL is sitting right here. We play them twice. We didn't lift that week. They had minicamp, 2 practices a day, 2 days, 1 practice, and then the program was over. Our guys are going to scatter. Meetings all throughout the day. That was an optional week for us. If you wanted to go in, bonus for me, bonus for you. But if you didn't want to go in, I completely understand after watching how hard our guys work on the football field. That's something that you got to take in as a planner. I planned it in. I knew, hey, when they go to minicamp, the good chance is we're not working out. Now, in other programs, they may say, hey, we still want them in, we'll adjust. In ours, we're going to get our football work done. And when that happens, you as a strength and conditioning professional, you have to be the one that keeps an eye out on the player. I always watch practices, and I always want to be one step ahead of where I think the player is going to be from a sense of fatigue. I never want our guys broke down, ever. So I'm always going to program one cycle above and ahead, so I'm always ahead of the game. So our guys are not like, man, I'm worn out. Do I have to work out today? I never want to be in that situation. So that's where big picture looking at, studying the dynamics of the sport you work with. That's what fills in all the color. That's a whole different discussion. My thought process today was to give the long planning. Too many people don't understand. It funnels from big to small rather than small to big. I'm showing small to big to work on definitions and how things link. But everything starts big to small. And in some cases, if you work in a college atmosphere, it's huge because you have 4 or 5 years of development with hopefully the same athlete. Here's just another model. This model I kind of played with. I was like, well, if I do get to lift them, do I want to just blow them up for good before because my guys, when they're done with 9 weeks, they're gone for another 6. So sometimes, here's where you get that knucklehead strength coach meathead in you. Well, if I do get to lift them, maybe I'll just blow them all up during minicamp and just fry them because I'm not going to see them for 6 weeks. But that's pretty stupid, so that got thrown out the window. I made that decision. But as a lifter and as you're a weight coach, man, we got to grind them up and spit them out. Those days are over, man. We got to develop these guys and let them know we care about them. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So that model was ridiculous and stupid. I'm honest. I'm the most honest guy you'll hear. I don't care. If I'm wrong, I'll tell you I'm wrong. If I don't know the answer, I'll tell you where I get it. I have a whole network of people I can call. You should have the same. I know what I know. What I don't know, I hire that person. And if I can't hire him, he's on my speed dial so I can call him or her. Now we start linking them together. This is where I talk about partial annual plan example and macros. What I showed you was what we have in yellow. And I know some people talk about the macro cycle being the year. I call that the annual plan. For me, macros are the linking of mesocycles that form a unique and distinct program. And what I've done, which has made it very simple for me, is I name programs based off the seasonal equinoxes of the year. So for example, this is called the Spring 2 program developmental stage on site. Why is it called spring? Because the dates of the program fell within March 22nd and June 22nd, which is, I think it's 2027, it might be a couple of days off. That's the spring equinox. June 23rd to I think September 22nd is summer. September 22nd to March 22nd is considered winter, and then March 22nd through spring, or fall, September, fall. So when we talk about programming as a group, if someone tells me we're in the fall developmental program, I know where they're at. Instead of, oh, we're in the, this whatever cycle, but I don't want to know that. I want things simple. I want my players to know this is the program we're on. Spring 2 means I had to separate Spring 1, which was a cycle that we had, hopefully, if we have when we send our guys home with the information we're allowed to send, was the cycle before we got them on site, and that's off-site. So our macrocycles and even sometimes our mesocycles are always going to be named within the equinoxes of the seasons. The only time it's not is during the competitive stage when we go into a typical, we're either in the preseason, in season, and what I classify postseason in the rejuvenation stage. When we get to playoffs, that's championship season. Postseason to me means it's over. Championship season means we're chasing a ring. And regardless of what that ring is it a high school state championship? Is it a district state championship? Is it a Super Bowl ring? Is it a specific bowl game? How many guys are out here, are college strength coaches that go to a bowl game or playoffs? Oh, totally different dynamic than I'm used to speaking to. In your cases, you go to the playoffs, what are you chasing? Championship ring. Every week, there ain't no time off. If you're in a bowl game and the best place you can go to is, the NSCA Bowl, then you're training to be the NSCA Bowl champion, because that's the best you can be that year. So this is what this actual chart is the chart that's up on one of my grease boards. And then what we do is you'll see, we have alternative stuff coming out with our summer offsite. Now our guys disappear again. Well, I know the week after they're done with minicamp, probably going to be an alternative mesocycle. And then you'll see where I just flipped the deload to reload week because that was 4th of July week. I'm sure most guys are going to be on vacation with their families. And then we come into training camp and then we start our preseason program. Okay, this is a model of what I call the annual plan. This was our first year at Louisville. And you'll see where we have competitions, evaluations, and discretionary periods. That's what I was talking about when I brought up uncontrollable factors of the periodization model. Once we've lined out our phases, and we've lined up our dates when we come back to school and so forth, the first thing I'm doing is writing in all the holidays, semester breaks, and what weeks that we are going to give them for discretionary time. The next thing I do is I write in all our competitions, what dates our games are for the competitive, and then I start writing in when we're going to do certain things in the lifting or on the field work. And this is just a general outline. We'll have our running emphasis during those phases, and then we'll talk a little bit more about quadrennial work. Then the different colors are at different levels. But this is the base model. This is the first thing we do. We actually start working on this the in-season of the previous year, so that when we come back to school, we're ready to roll and we have a plan based off of what level our athletes are at and how we did overall in the uniqueness of our programming. All those little initials and stuff, that's very specific to the way we train. I'm sure people are doing similar type of things. For us, our athletes really don't need to know it. Some of them do. Most of the time, this is strictly for the coaches to know. So, for example, if I'm the head strength coach and my number one role is football, and you work with us and you're volleyball, if you give me your plan, I'll know everything on that sheet because everything is in an umbrella terminology approach. It makes life simple, I promise you. Okay, what is this? I threw this up. It's a crude very, very crude graph of a standard deviation model. And I threw this up there because I'm tired of people talking about oh, you write cookie cutter program. I'm talking about in general, all you hear about. Everybody writes cookie cutter programs. Well, here's what I'll tell you in 23 years. If you're a real coach and a real practitioner, and you coach on the floor every day, there's no way you're writing a very specific program for every single athlete you coach. Because if you are, then you ain't coaching them. You're just handing out papers. But what you'll learn over time and experience is this. And it goes back to some of the stuff now with everybody screening athletes. Every year you have a group of athletes, you see the dynamics change. Most athletes and most people in general are going to fall into a bell curve. And that's how we've developed our quadrennial plan. And I stole the quadrennial plan model off the Olympic model. And if you work at a college, university setting, or a high school setting, I highly recommend you look at long-term athletic development for your athletes. The first thing you're going to do is correct numerous deficiencies, and you won't even have to screen them. 2, the overall reduction of injuries will be out of sight. And you can pat yourself on the back on that because you will have a direct correlation with that. Our society's in a rush. Everybody wants to break bread and pay $200 for this 8-week miracle program so their kids can be explosive in 8 weeks. It's not happening. It doesn't happen like that. The process and the adaptation that we have as a human body, it's long term. You got to be willing to work. You got to be willing to put in time. You know how I found that out? Because I was one of those guys who we all started, and coach over here, I know he started the same way. You bring freshmen in, you don't know their names. And I'm talking more specifically in the football model. Hey, what's your name? Oh, I don't care. You got a max squat. Don't even know if they ever squatted. Oh, you got a max bench. You got a max clean. I need your numbers. I need your numbers. Guys are getting hurt before you even know their names. Then they're training the same exact program at 17 as your 22-year-old senior. Somebody's not getting the right work. If you're writing the program for the 17-year-old, the 22-year-old's not getting the right work. And if you're writing the program for the 22-year-old, the 17-year-old's getting hurt. But, I'm honest. I did that type of work because that's how it went. I didn't know no better. We did that for a long time. And then I was like, man, this ain't right. I said it for years. How are we asking these dudes to bench press, can't even do a push-up? Why are we asking them to squat and they can't even get to parallel without any body weight? We missed the boat. We have rushed athletes into the weight room without taking the time out. Who are we trying to impress? Ourselves? What's the number one goal of why we train our athletes? The ability to protect them, right? But yet we're our own worst enemies when we get carried away in the weight room by doing things that our athletes aren't prepared to do. I'm at fault at that. I'm not going to lie. But I got smart. The bell curve. It's very simple. What I've found is, and again, it's skewed, but the majority of your athletes at the same age are going to fall somewhere within a bell curve. And most of them are going to fall within a typical 2 standard deviations, which is approximately 85%. Is that correct for some of you guys with math? 95 and 2? Or I thought that was 3. Okay. So let's say in that 90% of my freshmen are going to have all the same issues, regardless of gender and regardless of sport. Weak core, weak hamstring, weak posterior shoulder. I do the functional movement screen. I like it. It gives me some interesting dynamics. But at the end of the day, when we start looking at all the results, what do we find out? Weak hamstrings, weak posterior shoulder, weak core, and now I'm getting more in tune of ankle mobility and stuff. Well, guess what? If I know that's a fact, why aren't I training those kids to get better at that without training for specific tests? Here's my problem with the movement screen stuff. Guys like, oh, they got a movement screen of 9, they can't train until they get whatever, and then they're just working on the movement screen stuff, and then they get an 18, and they still can't squat. Because they haven't been training. They've been training to beat the test. No different than combine prep, no different than any coach who's training their kids to pass their running tests. If you tell me your running test is 300-yard shuttle, I'm going to train you a lot different than if it's 110s. I'm going to train you a lot different if it's 40s. I'm going to train you to beat the test. Has nothing to do with football, because as soon as we go to our first team period, it looks like our guys didn't even condition all summer. So I'm going to develop a holistic plan. That was our goal. And the first thing we did, and this was a big shout out to 3 assistants who really took this off and ran, was Mark Uyama, Ben Hilgert, and Brian Dermody. Those guys pretty much were my block 0 guys. They took our freshman classes. They developed a strategy, that was really outside the norm. Because now we're talking about college football players is a little different than the other sports. Football coaches are different. But for the first 6 to 9 weeks that our freshmen entered our program, they didn't touch a weight. That's hard. You got to have a great head coach to do that. 6 to 9 weeks, our guys didn't touch a weight. Why? Because most of them couldn't do a pull-up. Most of them couldn't do an iso back extension hold for more than 15 seconds. Their hip mobility was awful. And I mean, even a simple, couldn't touch their toes, couldn't do an iso hold lunge without tipping over. But yet, really, they should be squatting, benching, and cleaning, right? And if you're going to talk about we got to do right by our players, I'm going to have those kids for 5 years. And if they're really great football players, they're going to play anyway. Because I've seen it. We've all seen it, whether it's an 8th grader going into 9th grade who's never lifted a weight and he's better than anybody you got. That kid's playing varsity. Never lifted a weight. If he's the best player you got, you're playing him. You bring a freshman into college, and he's never lifted a weight in high school because he's played 7 different sports, but he's the best player you got. You're playing him. So why not teach him right? Because I can guarantee you this. If that guy's that good without lifting weights, and you get him from doing 5 pull-ups to 10 pull-ups, doesn't that make him better? And that's lifting weights. It's just using internal resistance versus external resistance. So this graph, to me, just dictates how we plan our quadrennial plan with our athletes. And regardless of sport, you look at the dynamics of the athletes you coach, and you watch the unique progressions. Now, like we said, like this gentleman right here helped me out. You got your 5% on either end. But all of our guys go through our block progressions. Some may go through faster than others. And that's not cookie cutter. That's huge group coaching. If you coach large groups, you see similarities. And that's how we develop a long-term quadrennial approach to programming. If you have the ability to where you know you're going to have kids for 4 to 5 years, rethink, look at your model. Your model's not wrong, but you can slowly develop things. Like the number one exercise for us for freshmen or beginners is the high handle hex bar deadlift. Trap bar with the high handles. Here's why, and it goes back to mobility and screening. I know the majority of the athletes that I get have very poor hamstring strength and hip mobility. I believe in the deadlift. We do a lot of things from the ground. If you're going to be a power clean coach, then they have to learn how to deadlift. Because you will never clean more than you deadlift. And the confidence that brings, and the strength in the posterior chain and in the upper and mid back that the deadlift brings, will bring that athlete extreme confidence when he approaches the bar. But I already know through my screening process and everything else that 95% of those guys would be in poor position if they had to approach the height of a standard barbell on the ground. I know that. But I also know that I'm not going to just work on hip mobility without getting them stronger. I'm a strength guy. I got to get them stronger. Everything I believe comes on strength. You want to get faster? Get stronger. You want to jump higher? Get stronger. You want more lean body mass? Get stronger. You want to be in better shape? Get stronger. You don't want to get hurt? Get stronger. So I'm going to get them strong. But I'm also going to get them strong smart. And when you use the high handle hex bar, it gets them in a better biomechanical position, and because it's about a 4-inch greater in height, you can get them in a great position, build strength while you're still doing all your movement work to improve their mobility. Now I've comboed it up. I'm training them smart, and I'm progressing to another phase of lifting. Everything you should do is you should look at where you want them to be and break everything down. Every exercise can be broken down in certain components. No more than Olympic lifts. And the one thing that Mike Conroy taught me about long-term planning in the Olympic lifts is this. What do we really want from the Olympic lifts? Triple extension, am I correct? Am I correct? But then how many of us allow our guys to get to here and then do something crazy where they never extend their hips? How many of you have done it? Don't be afraid, because I know you've done it. I come in your room right now, and I guarantee you somebody's going to do it because they're worried about, oh, I got to catch this weight to get on the board. Well, let's worry about transfer, because that same guy goes out to the field, and now it comes back to you. Coach, you said Johnny clean 340. He can't even get off the line of scrimmage. Well, yeah, because he never learned how to extend his hips. You can get a tremendous amount of work off of clean pulls and high pulls, working specifically on triple extension without ever catching a clean. And at the end, that's the transfer you're looking for. Slow the process down. Why throw them right into cleans when that's a part of an Olympic movement? Build your learn-term process. Look at an exercise. Break it all the way down and slow cook these guys. And now I spent 6 months in a facility training in the private sector. So now I can even relate to those coaches who train at that particular setting. I understand that situation of, well, look, we may not have them that long. But you know what my goal was? Oh, I'm going to have them that long because I'm going to do it right. I'm not selling the old, hey, for $200 I can get you right in 8 weeks. I'm selling, hey, after 8 weeks, if you want to come back, we're moving to week 9. Your goal in that place, hey, I get it, man, you got to sell. I wasn't very good at it. I had to get them in the door and coach the hell out of them, and then they would come back. But I didn't like selling, oh, and by the way, it cost this. I didn't like it. I wasn't good at it. But when I got them in the door, they were signing up they were signing up because they saw the process. My goal was this, no different than when I'm at college or high school, was I'm going to show them how well I am, that this is going to be a 10-year relationship with these people. They're going to be the best of the best wherever they're at. Whether it's at their high school or going to college. I tell everybody who works in the private setting after being there, your number one goal should be this, that when your athlete goes to their school, whether it's their high school or you're training that athlete for a long period of time, you've got that relationship set, and they go to college, that college strength coach calls you and tells you, you did a terrific job with that kid. Because right now, most college strength coaches would wish none of those guys trained. If you ask any one of my colleagues, Coach, would you agree? They would tell you, I'd rather them not train at all than what we're seeing when they come in. That's your challenge to the private coach. Be that guy. Be that person. Be the one where that coach says, hey, who trained you? You are right. Be that guy. It's long term. I don't care what setting you're in. You have to look at it from long term. And in the private setting, it's a long term. You got to build that relationship. You got to believe in everything you can. And it was hard for me because I had to adjust my block zero planning because I know how parents are. My kid ain't lifting any weights. Screw that, I'm going to this guy. Okay, and then they come back because he's hurt. I got to a point where the facility I trained out of, they called me Mr. Miyagi because I was doing so much different stuff than they never seen. And then when they saw the results, they were like, we didn't even know you were training for that. So it's a process. It's a process. And that's what this bell curve represents. That represents a 4-year process. Represents a 5-year process. Because every level you raise your athletes, they're going to change. In a very basic way, it was this for us. Block zero, we've got to get them to be able to move with their own body weight. That's simple. Relative strength. Block 2, improve their maximal strength. Block 1. Block 2, introduce explosive strength. Block 3 and 4, tremendous amount of variation, working on strength, power, endurance, and a whole unique array of things in the weight room. Running was very similar. Running's a little bit different. Except for the plyos and the jumps and throws, the running was slightly generalized more. But in the lifting, you've got to be able to break it down. You have to be able to break it down. I'm way over now. I'm in trouble. Excuse me? We have block 0 was our beginners. And then block 1 was our first year. Block 2 was our second, 3 and 4. Yeah, first block was all body weight. Like if I was doing high school, my goal would be to get all the 8th graders, second semester, going into 9th grade, and for 6 months doing extensive body weight mobility work. So that when you do turn them over to the high school coaches as a 9th grader, at least they'll have confidence in their abilities to move. Then you can introduce the exercise technique in block 1, and then work on strength and power and stuff as they get older. Okay, now a little bit more specific. I'm over, aren't I? Hey, if you all need to go, get up and go. You're not going to, I understand. How many of you are familiar with Prilepin's chart? Okay, Prilepin's chart is a gentleman, A.S. Prilepin, Olympic weightlifting coach. He came out with sets and reps of how to distinguish the amount of speed at a certain percentage you can maintain in the Olympic lifts. I also use it for squatting and benching and max effort work. This is how I broke it. Most of the chart is nowhere near as broke down as this. This is our HIT chart, and it just gives us sets and reps that we can follow, and this is how we decipher one of our programs. This is more for the coaches. What you guys want to see is this. This is how we break down volumes and intensities for our block program. I do this because when I do train our athletes in groups, they come in, they get their cards, they're on different blocks, but they're at different volumes. Like you'll see at 70% of week B, our block 1 guys would either do 6 sets of 4 or 5 sets of 5. But down here at elite block 4, they're going to do 5 sets of 3 or 4 sets of 3. What we tend to do is as they get older, I do not want to necessarily beat them up with big exercises. They're doing more supplemental and auxiliary work to equal out the volume. They're still going to do big lifts, but with not as much work. Their work comes into all the supplemental stuff we do at that level. Okay, this is when we talk a little bit about that off-the-script stuff I was talking about. So this is pure data from one of our summer programs at the University of Louisville. So week 1, the athlete had 70%, 5 sets of 5. His workout load going in was a 530 1 RM max. That was a pure 1 RM. We worked him up almost like a meet. He did 530. So week 1, he does 370, 5 sets of 5. Week 2 is an off-the-script week for volume. So what we do is it's prescribed 5 sets of 5, but the very last set, we set a parameter of max 10, max 15, and that's a challenge set. We expect our athletes to do as many reps as possible to that number. This particular athlete did his first 4 sets after pre-work, 4 sets of 5 at 405, then he knocked out 405 for 15 reps. And we go top of the thigh parallel. That's our squat depth. Week 3, deload to reload. Go down to 385, 4 sets of 4. Now here's the big one here. Here's our performance week. Performance week was 6 sets of 3 at 82%. What we do is, because I want things done under fatigue, when we know we're going to take somebody off the script, they have to do half of this prescribed work. So what they're doing is, for his number was 435, he's doing that for the first 3 sets of 3. If I think he can keep going off the script, then we start ramping it up. If it looks like he's okay and it's not going to be a very good day for him, he stays and would do 6 sets of 3 at 435. Does that make sense so far? But now, this guy can go. So we take him to 450, 465, 480, 500, 515 for 3. And what we do is, the off-the-script repetition max is the same as what we're asking for the work sets. So if this said 6 sets of 2, then we would have done doubles. If it would have said 6 sets of 1, singles, 6 sets of 5, you guys understand where we're going with it. So that's just a model of showing real life of here's 4 microcycles of work for the back squat. This was a complete performance cycle with 2 OTS weeks. Here is another cycling plan that we use. I just started working with this the last 4 years and have had tremendous results in strength and lean body mass gains. What we've done is we've flat loaded the percentages and ramp up the volume. This is just one model, 80%. And what you'll see is we start at 80 week 1, do 5 sets of 5. Week 2, 5 sets of 6. Week 3, we deload to reload. So we do the first 3 sets and drop the volume tremendously. And then we're bringing it 5 sets of 8. When we use these types of percentages, I'm not going to lie, this number right here is based off of the old estimated 1 RM or repetition max cycles. So you can see my goal here is increase volume and get what's particular respect. Usually if I'm going to warm up to an 8, these might be 2, 2, 2, 2. I want these dudes working. I want my athletes working. This has put on tremendous amount of lean body mass and reduced body fat in all of our guys. Because here's the key. The key is if I do 5 sets of 5 in 25 minutes, I got to do 5 sets of 8 in 25 minutes. That's where we ramp up the density and we get our guys in shape. Here's one last cycle I wanted to show you. This is for our high-level guys. You'll see it's always in red. That's because we're ramping up high level. Now, if I've got a guy for 5 years, we're going to use different abilities to keep working on improving. This is just a chain cycle that we use for squats and benches. And what it is it's using accommodating resistance to work top-end levers. We've almost had 100% outstanding results when we test our guys on this. But what it is if we understand accommodating resistance, if we do a quarter squat, we can squat more than a full squat. So we want to take advantage of that. We use chains. So as the levers change and the load increases, it evens out based off our strength curve. Basically what it is, it's based off a 5x5 and then off the script. Week 1, we use double chain on each side. And we make sure the chain deloads. The chain has to be at 0 at the bottom. Too many guys use too much chain and it never deloads because they just hook it, so you never get the pure percentage you need at the bottom. The next week we do 5 sets of 5 with 1 set of chain. The next week we do 5 sets of 5 with 3 sets. The 4th week, the performance week, we throw all the chains off, straight weight, and then they go for it. With upper body strength and the amount of work the triceps need in pressing, this thing has almost been foolproof for us with the improvements we've had. Because most of the time, even guys with power lifters, and this is where the raw lifter has to understand the difference between lifting with a bench shirt and without, is everything's going to come off the chest and then the triceps take over, whether you wear a bench shirt or not. Most athletes very rarely get magnet chest. They're going to get it off. But if you look at injuries, most injuries in bench press come from shoulder and pec. But what's the limiting factor of extending and finishing a weight? Triceps. We're going to work the triceps. And we're going to work them into a path that helps us, and more functionally, which is a word I really don't like to use, especially with striking, with O-linemen in particular. And these are just more real live results of what we did with this type of work. I hope I didn't bore you. I'm sorry I went about 5 to 8 minutes over. If you guys have any questions, I'll be around. If not, thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of the time. It's my pleasure.